Yeah. Okay. Great. Good evening and welcome to the February 12th, 2025 meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid manner. And we always provide for citizen requests to address the Finance Committee. So you're certainly welcome to follow along with the meeting, address us in the beginning, but not participate when we're going forward. So with that, I will call the meeting to order. Are there any citizens to request to address the Finance Committee? Seeing none, we'll move to approval of the minutes. Everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Would somebody like to?
Make a motion to accept these minutes for the last meeting.
Second.
Great, and we'll take a roll call vote since we have many members online. Let's start with Karen.
Oh, yeah, was I there for that meeting though, now that I'm thinking about it?
Yes.
I was, yeah, okay, so yes,
Okay, Joe,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
okay, Tina,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay. Minutes are approved. So the first budget, we're gonna hear from the building department. Is that done?
Right here, okay?
And,
I'll take it.
okay,
I feel how are you?
Excellent, how are you?
Pretty good. Nice day one. By way of overview, the 2025 budget total for the building department is $920,595. The level service request for 2026 budget is $950,120, a delta of $29,525. On a percentage basis, it's 3.2%. By way of further information, there is a DSR4 request that involves converting a part-time position into a full-time position, looking at a potential retirement, among other things. The interesting point there is it's net $30,703 difference or an additional budget item, which would make the total 2026 budget request with that DSR for $980,823 and 6.5%. By way of other information, the town manager's budget, as they did with all the other DSR boards, deferred that request. So the town manager's budget is back to the $950,120 that we stated. There are no capital requests in this budget. And just by way of anecdotal fee collections, 2022 fees were $2.5 million. 2023 fees were $4.8 million. 2024 fees were $2.3 million. And there's no other information regarding where we are this year. So, did I get everyone to follow the big points?
I think you did.
Okay. So I opened up to questions from the rest of the team.
can you talk a little bit about the, and I know it wasn't approved by the town manager, but just the part-time position converting into a full-time and the anticipated retirement, like how quickly you think that happened? It's how that would all work.
So the person that holds that position has told me over the year and a half that I've been here that he was considering retiring in the beginning of this year. My guess is that he's staying on because we just had another resignation, so we're short-staffed. Um. But I can't say for sure that he would. He may stay on for another 5 years in this part-time position, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
My hope was that, if he did retire, I could convert that from a. Part-time, it's a 0.6 part-time,
So
so,
it's the part-time position that that person is retiring.
yeah, if he retires, I would like to hire someone back at a full-time position. Primarily because we are, so far behind on what are called. For lack of a better term, what we call annual inspection certificates, or state inspection certificates. The building code requires that we, inspect and certify that they have safe egress and other features. In a number of buildings, including public and private schools, churches, assembly halls, restaurants, daycare centers, funeral homes. Nightclubs, if we had any, there's a more comprehensive list within my, request. And over the years, that system, the department has struggled with, especially with the construction boom. But we are required by the state building code to do these inspections. And I don't see a way to get back on track with that without additional help.
How far behind are you, or?
Of the, I think I said about of the 160 or so buildings, I think we're probably getting about 30 of them a year, 30 to 40 of them a year. Those are some of them, for example, the restaurants that serve liquor can't renew their liquor license unless they have their inspection and approval from us. Daycare centers can't renew their licenses with the Office of Children unless they have that inspection certificate completed by us. So those are essentially the ones that we're able to get done. And the rest are just not.
If you're not able to keep up with it, is there any potential liability that could fall back on the town for not doing it?
I would think so, but I would defer to proceed on that.
How often do they expire? You have to,
So most buildings that have larger occupancies like restaurants and assembly halls and gyms and that type of thing are every year. Residential buildings, multifamily residential buildings, apartment buildings are every 5 years.
okay, and of the 160, how many of those are the ones that expire every year? So you said there were 160 and we're getting to about 30 a year?
Yeah, all of them are the 1 year certificates. There are no 5 year certificates. that
We're just
getting there.
not
We're just not.
getting
Yeah.
to.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So with these expiring, are those jumping the queue because we have to get those done? And is it resulting in others like just staying in queue and not getting addressed? I'm trying to understand whether the queue is linear and you're actually tackling everything on the queue before you start tackling new things, or are these urgent ones jump in the queue and therefore, you have stale ones aging, I guess, in your queue.
I guess if I understand the question, I would say they're jumping the queue because they cannot continue to operate their business. Either their liquor license wouldn't be renewed or their certification from the Office of Children would not be renewed.
Hey, Joe, if you had a full staff and assuming that you had this full-time, excuse me, this full-time position, how many of these more of these inspections could you do?
Well, the goal is to do them all. It remains to be seen if we'd be able to get them all, but I think we'd be able to get a significant additional number with an additional staff person.
But if you have, you said you do 30 a year,
Mhm.
so I'm assuming that 30 is 100% restaurants and daycare centers? Or anybody that's coming up for their 5-year anniversary?
Anybody that has an outside required renewal by another agency. Are the ones that are getting done. And I'm not sure I follow the rest of the question.
So my question is, how many, if you're doing 30,
Mhm.
how many should you be doing to stay on track? Like 50 or?
Per year, we should be doing all of them, all 160 Well, I'd have to look at I'd have to dig up the numbers again, let me just.
But the 160 buildings, you said some of them require inspections once
Yeah.
a year and others once every 5 years.
No, that 160, I think he said.
He said,
I know.
confirmed there was.
The
those
ones that
were
are all
all-
1 year.
I think the.
160 that require 1 year and 40 that require every 5 years.
Okay.
So, and you're prioritizing the ones that are restaurants that need the liquor license and daycares and things that need certifications, but what are there other impacts to these businesses that are not being inspected and not receiving this that we don't know about?
Well, the impact, I wouldn't necessarily call it an impact, you know, what we're looking for is that they're maintaining their egress facilities in a safe manner. That
Right.
their
So
exit
it's a
doors
safety
open, that, yeah, that their exit doors open, their emergency lights are on, that they're, all of those features that go into an exit facility, and that there's no, you know, no excessive storage in areas where it shouldn't be.
How much time does one inspection take, or is it dependent on the
It
system?
depends on the facility, you know, a lot of the smaller restaurants are, you know, the inspection occurs in about a half an hour to 45 minutes. Depending on what we find, we write up a list of violations. That gets entered into the system, then they have to call and have it read, you know, they have to abate the violations and then call us back. And we have to go back and re-inspect those. You know, I look at a complex like North Hill,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't even begin to be able to estimate that right now until we actually got in there and started walking the buildings. Although that would be a 5-year certificate.
How does your planned overhaul of your electronic permitting system fold into this?
So the Viewpoint Cloud, VPC, permitting system was adopted prior to my getting here back in 2020-ish. From what I understand, just before the pandemic hit. The push was on prior to that to go electronic, as a lot of cities and towns had to do or wanted to do. And then when the pandemic hit, they really pushed. So the system was developed in kind of a rushed way, that there's a lot of redundancies and things that could be streamlined to make the permitting process easier for both staff side and the user side. But the other thing that with any electronic permitting system, there are updates to codes and processes that change over there. So you have to go back every 3, 4, 5 years and review those changes and make adjustments within the system to accommodate the new codes.
And who's doing that?
We are working on that. All of our staff are working on that. Right now, we've just really developed a list of all the changes that we'd like to make. So we have an entire whiteboard full of, you know, what we've been having people do is just, you know, think of something that needs to change, get in right on the board, and then we'll compile that. But also what I did, I think we have approximately 20 different types of permit applications, whether it be a building permit, electrical, fire sprinkler, alarm. I've gone in and looked at each of those permits from the user side and looked at all the redundancies and how we could make that easier for the user. And a good example, though, of a new permit that we have to develop is for ADUs. We have to have a specific permit for that. The system doesn't have it. It wasn't anticipated when they built the system. So we have to develop a new application for that. And a workflow, you know, how does that go and how do we track it?
But you're doing that work in turn.
We do it, all that work has to occur internally, yes. It is a monumental task. And even harder to do when we're short-staffed.
Joe, when did this other vacancy happen? How long is it, how long has that position been open?
December 17th, my assistant building commissioner, Eric Tardif, resigned and moved on to another town.
Can I ask a follow-up on the permits? So is it just the 0.6 part-time position that is working on doing all of those?
No, all all building inspectors do all of the duties that we do.
Okay,
So,
so it would be, is there a way to divert resources to some of these that you're not getting to, or
not at this
is
point
it
in
just
time.
that position that's able to be increased to?
You know, if we increase that position, then everybody in this, every building inspector will have more time to do those inspections.
Okay, so that's one subset of the other inspections that you're working on,
Right.
that you're not getting to.
So if you could, so right now you're down one position.
Right.
And if you had the one, if you had the one position and could convert this part-time to full-time, you could fully close that backlog, do you think?
I think that's gonna take 2 to 3 years. The other part of it is that when they built the VPC system, they we'll put it this way, the health department has a permitting system in VPC for their recurring inspections for restaurants, for example. I want to, we don't have that for these recurring inspections, so I wanna use that model. So
Is it the same system?
it's the same system, but it's just a different type of permit in a different process, so. Right now, for example, we have to send out a notice manually to the entity saying, hey, you know. You're, because most folks don't pay attention to it until it's crunch time. So we send out a manual notice, whether it's an email or even sometimes a paper letter to the contact person. And then they, you know, sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. This, if we take the, so then they have to go into the permitting system and apply for their renewal every year as if they're starting from scratch. But if we convert it to this recurring system that's available to us, then the system will send out notices automatically, and a lot of their information will autofill, and it will make that part of the process even easier. So we expect to gain some ground just by doing that. But all of it is, you know, to be honest, I think if I were to say, you know, or if somebody were to say you need to get this done in a year, I would ask for 3 more persons. I'm asking for a half a position to help catch up on that backlog. It's gonna be a long process.
But the automated renewal of this system is in process now to be.
That's part of the whole
Sure.
revision of the
Okay.
of the system.
And
That's included in.
When will that be complete?
I would have hoped it would have been complete a month ago, but again, short-staffed. At this point, I'd have to say I would hope for July 1st. I think that's the best I could look at.
And Joe, just remind us, I remember, I think you mentioned something about this part-time position. How old, this guy is pretty old, right? The part-time,
I
Or
know
no.
there's an eight in his age somewhere.
No, no. Don't talk about it.
Okay,
Thank you.
no. We're thankful he's still working.
And how quickly do you think you can, you're obviously in the process of replacing the assistant building inspector.
correct.
How long do you, like?
Well,
what's the-
so the direction we're going right now is we believe we're promoting within an existing local inspector. And then we'll want, if that occurs within the next week or two, then we'll have to advertise that position and rehire. So it's another 2 months easily before we're fully staffed.
It's the current environment that like now for.
Awful.
Awful?
Yep.
How does somebody, okay,
Yeah, you know, what we're seeing is that, the reality is people who are qualified to be building inspectors are out in the private industry getting $150 an hour. I think that's a problem with all cities and towns. They're all having this problem. You know, we hope that by promoting the excellent retirement system and benefits that's what we really have to push to convince these folks that this is a job worth taking.
Do you think that the job is more marketable as a full-time position or as a part-time position?
I do think it's more marketable as a full-time position.
Any other questions? Barry? Joe? Karen?
Can I ask a
Yes,
question?
please.
To Kate, is there a reason, like, was there, I didn't catch it in the book, or I don't know if it's, but is there a reason why we didn't recommend this?
We didn't fund any new requests.
So it was just done across the board, it wasn't specific to this?
No.
And there's no way that you, like, in peak periods, you can outsource any of that. I mean, I noticed that you had provided funds for an engineering consulting service that you didn't use, so those were turned back last year, or,
So that's a different a different type of I'm not sure exactly how to put it. So that the money for the outside on the third party consultant is what that is. Not necessarily outsourcing the work. Third party consultant, that money was originally dedicated to the fire department. But then it was determined that it's really the building code
Oh,
that
okay.
regulates fire alarms and fire sprinkler systems. And sometimes some of these bigger new commercial buildings, their systems are their fire systems are so complex that we need that outside consultant to ensure compliance with the code. So that's what that money is set aside for.
Okay.
So I couldn't use that to bring in someone to help with the day-to-day operation, no.
no, I was suggesting that right now you have an open position in your budget
Mhm.
and you're not paying for that salary. You know, can you during peak periods, hire an outside building inspector?
Oh, yeah, I actually
have
have
you done
I
that?
have a separate line item for that, but I haven't had the opportunity, I haven't had a chance to get to that yet, to seek someone else to come in. But I may need to do that.
And is that
But
just
that
to
person-
find that person?
That person would only do inspections because plan review and issuing permits is specific, is so tied to our zoning bylaw. That if I bring in someone from Dedham or Westwood, I wouldn't want them trying to interpret our zoning bylaw.
No, I understand that, but isn't inspections where the bottleneck is? Isn't the inspection what you need the most?
Yes, whether it's these inspections that we're talking about or the regular inspections, anything I can do to help free that up will be helpful, yes.
All right, further questions, anybody else?
Okay,
Great, thanks so much for
All right,
coming in.
thanks, folks.
Appreciate it.
Have a well night.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, so. If you don't mind, I'm just going to change the order. So. Barry, do you want to give us just a quick summary on Minuteman?
Sure, and I didn't get a chance to review this with Jeff, who is Needham's representative to the Minuteman Committee. We basically have no real influence on this budget. It's a budget that is somewhat formulaic and based on our pro rata share of the costs of Minuteman. And as you can see in the book, Needham has actually significantly increased the number of students that we've sent to Minuteman, which is what we had actually hoped for. The new school has been great. It's been received extremely well. You may remember we went through before the new school was built. The district was overhauled from 16 towns to 9 towns. Excuse me. And so our relative share has continued to increase. The budget number is in the book is an estimate. We won't get the final number till the spring, I believe. I forget exactly when that is. And what I don't know is they're going through a process for evaluating a long-term capital plan. And I believe, and I don't know for certain if there's an assessment amount in this budget estimate or not. That I can't confirm. But maybe, Kate or Miles has that information.
About 550 of the total is capital.
Okay. Is that not, that's not based on a new assessment, that's just based on our share from the,
It's all based on a 4-year rolling average. Of existing capital and debt.
okay. So, I mean, that's, I believe at town meeting, we should have, we usually get a presentation about Minuteman and the budget, but all in all, it's been hugely successful. And matter of fact, this year Needham, one of the things they started was a co-op program, and then our last meeting, there were a couple of co-op students from Needham that came in and talked about their experiences in working. I think one actually was interning with a plumbing a local plumber, and I think one was also interning at the DPW. So it's been a pretty successful the new school has been very successful. Matter of fact, we used to have big spots available to outsiders when if the member towns couldn't fill it. And now actually I don't believe there are any outsiders outside the 9 towns that are attending Minuteman. So again, we have no discretion in this budget, but that is in a nutshell sort of why it's been increasing.
And this is a question, Kate, for you. How did the 900,000 reduction come? What was that from?
So we did an estimate in October when we developed the budget based on our estimate, and then we got a preliminary estimate.
Okay, so that's just a head change, if the number of students change, or is it?
We do our calculation by what we think they're gonna check, and then they gave us their number. And in fact, I did get a number this Monday, and it's just about the same number. I'll get it to you.
Okay,
So it's still 105 down,
okay.
a little bit more.
Is it based on a per student enrollment cost, or is it just the total percent share, like, and they just?
It's a 4-year rolling average of enrollment that they use for calculating the assessments. So
they should keep
Needham's
probably
was
going.
high because we had real growth in enrollment.
Excessive expensive.
It's a great thing.
It is a great thing. With the new school, it was. But the towns that opted not to go forward,
And now they want to get in.
do they really?
Right.
What did they do?
They don't offer vocation.
Really?
But they don't have to? It's not a requirement?
They have to,
It-
if they're not part of a vocational school district, then they have to pay if the student successfully gets accepted as a tuition-based student in another school, for instance, if there's
Just like
program
an out of district.
out of district.
Right.
Like going to Keefe or something.
Yes, Keep Tech. If the student can get accepted,
Tri-County.
Tri-County will be another.
Yeah, Blue Hills is another one, and I think there's, but yeah, a lot of towns get really spooked by the cost of the new building, and you wouldn't, their towns wouldn't support it, so.
Great. All right, thank you. Thanks, Barry. Moving on to the final townwide expenses. So we have the select board and office of the town manager, and that
That's
is-
me.
That's Joe. Joe.
Yep, I can give a quick overview. So Katie and Miles and I met earlier this week to go through this budget, which really comprises of 3 departments, the office of the town manager, the select board, and HR. And I think all told, that comprises 11 full-time positions and 2 part-time positions. The budget is relatively flat from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. I think that the actual increase is small at 2.8%, which is much smaller than in prior years. That 2.8% is roughly $45,500, and most of that is due to salary increases and step increases. There is also a small net increase in expenses, and we can get through the itemization of that. But one thing that's notable in that expense total, I think Miles had pointed out, and it's in the material, it's offset by the actual cost of the boards and committee software. I think the actuals came in 15,000 less than what was originally anticipated. So that kind of helped the expense line. A couple other things to highlight. Last year, there was a 4.8% turn back, and that was due to a 2-month vacancy in the administrative specialist position. So that's why that was unspent. There are no DSR 4s that were put forth, and I know there's no DSR 4s generally speaking. There is a DSR 5 that we probably just talk through, and it's for a compensation and classification study. So basically, to every 5 years, do an independent evaluation of what our steps are and the pay ranges in those, to make sure that we're consistent across the town. And also, it's good input as the town's trying to maintain competitive positions as things open up over the years. So that DSR 5 is in here. That goes into this May spring warrant. And then lastly, the other item I just wanted to highlight at the end of the packet is a capital request of $40,000, and that's for some outdated furniture that needs replacement. And I think the intent there is, as these things get to the end of their useful life and they're really not practical for today's working environment, particularly things like more ergonomic chairs, ergonomic desks, the capital request is intended to bring some of those things to bear and replace some of the outdated furniture. So again, overall, relatively flat budget from last year to this year. And Miles, I see you there at the table, so I'll turn it over to you.
Great job.
I know this isn't part of the budget, but just that compensation study, you just talk about if that's approved at town meeting, when that would start and how long that would last, and what we did the last one 5 years ago, and
Yes, we appropriated the funds in 2017 and we did the study. It got implemented on July 1, 2021 because everything kind of stopped in 2020. And one of the things that happened is because we did all the data gathering in FY18, when we implemented FY 21, we were a little bit behind in terms of the data that we had collected, so
Mhm.
that's just that was a fact of life in COVID. So yes, we try to do all of the positions every 5 years. And as Joe pointed out, to remain competitive, but also to make sure that we are in compliance with the Mass Fair Pay Act. That people working with similar responsibilities get paid similar amounts.
And how many positions does it?
Well,
Because it's not the schools, right?
it's not the schools and it's not public safety, so we have 400 people, that's probably 250, 275 people. It's not that many titles, but it's all the managers, administrative professionals, admins, custodial trades and public works.
And is the kind of 5-year cycle just best practices, or is that, a requirement that unions have?
It's a
or-
best practice that we've actually, since I've been here, which is a very long time,
Mhm.
we've aimed for that, yeah.
And I have just one like observation here. Uh. one second, the chart. Why is I think it's interesting that. The rentals from like Powers Hall and like, what's going on there? Just. Is that a hangover from COVID or?
I'd venture to say that there used to be a ton of programming that, and I came into the scene in 2021, we weren't accepting outside groups at Powers, in Powers, still due to the pandemic at the time. And looking back into the records, there were a lot of events that used to be hosted there, things like fundraisers. I know one example that I could think of is the Giffords Catch Holder always did a fundraiser every year at Powers Hall, and they no longer do that. And I think it speaks to, yes, a hangover, and also nonprofit groups have moved away from some of the real in-person programming, especially when it comes
Even
to
now.
big things like fundraising. Yeah, and it is, I think hangover is absolutely the best way to explain the primary piece of that, but relative to the municipal events, I think we moved back to about average, and we're hosting a bunch of stuff up there. Even just this week, as you saw, with the Envision Needham Center kickoff, and some of our public engagement events with Eversource and the MWRA, and
Mhm.
it's getting used, which is something we love to see.
We also hear that, we do charge, it's not a terribly high amount, but if you have a ticketed event, we charge per ticket, so we can help defray the costs of maintaining it and we only permit it to nonprofits, so all the nonprofits, they're
Yeah.
trying to find a cheaper option, I think sometimes.
Right, well, I think it's like, yeah, there's a charge and then there's obviously also a custodian fee
Yeah.
on top of it, so it does get expensive
And we don't have kitchen facilities,
and there's no kitchen
So,
facilities.
people did use it for a long time, bringing the food in and heating it, but it's suitable for some events and not big sit down dinners, I think.
Right, it's too bad because it's such a great space, so,
We use it a lot.
We do.
great. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
The community
Yes.
council is having a fundraiser there next month.
Yes, the community council, they love it.
Okay, so the remaining, townwide expenses, so we didn't talk about, casualty liability, okay.
Do we need to discuss the finance committee and reserve fund, or you want to skip that?
I'm sorry,
The finance committee and reserve fund? Did you want to do that before?
well, yeah, we're good. Oh, right, okay. I figured I would just do the reserve funds last, but let's talk about the lofty budget for the finance committee. So there's really not much to say there. Thank you, Molly, for all your great work. our expenses associated, professional expenses went up a little bit because we have a lot of new people and we signed up for some conferences, so there's that. And reserve fund. So do you want to speak to that, Dave? Because
Sure, the reserve fund, the finance committee traditionally budgets for a starting number works off of a formula that we came up with pro forma a number of years ago with Louise Misgard. And basically that's taking the prior year's budget and appropriating for reserve fund based upon 1.4% of that, excluding the budget for retirement assessments, OPEB, the reserve fund itself and debt service. The reason is all those budgets are known and don't change. The assessment for retirement is fixed, the assessment for OPEB is fixed, and we know what our debt payments are. So there should not be any unexpected surprises for that. That's how the submission comes forward. The town manager is recommending a budget of $1.8 million, which
that was less than your suggested.
the yes, I was looking at level dollar for the reserve fund, but given the tightness of revenues, funding the reserve at the level dollar, while you're probably making reductions to budgets that you probably have to then backfill because as you just heard, like building inspector, there's still work needs to be done every day. Or just seem more appropriate to take it from reduced reserve down to 1.8 million, which we have not come anywhere near to meeting that level in many years.
Mhm. Okay. Questions? Joe?
Do you have data of like what the reserve fund, what percent we use in reserve of the total budget over the last few years?
Yes, it,
And how that compares to what we're gonna like?
yes, at 1.8 billion, that will be on par as the average that the reserve fund has been set at. Since like having 20 years history.
Just curious.
And how does that policy compare to other towns that set their, that established their?
Most don't have a policy. It tends to be an afterthought. In fact, usually towns are astonished by the level that we carry.
Really?
But we do something that many towns don't do is in setting that reserve, we also try to cover snow and ice expenses with that when we used to have snow. And
Well, but this year we.
this year, yeah, we have, so that's one of the reasons we keep it high, where some communities, they just automatically raise the deficit, snow and ice expenses is one budget that can, the communities are allowed to deficit spend, and you can spend more than was appropriated, and then they automatically raise it as an expense in the following year. That's, which impacts it. But so that's one aspect why our budget is larger. And then again, tradition with everything we do in Needham is we're a little more prudent and conservative in our approach. Is the unexpected has and could happen.
Right.
So we can hire many communities that work with like 300 communities that budgets comparable to ours have budgets for reserve funds like 350,000, 5,000.
Even like Wellesley or?
I don't know what Wellesley's is, they didn't much there, but communities like Natick and Norwood, they have much smaller reserve funds.
And next is casualty liability, property and self-insurance. And, basically, the annual premium is assumed to increase by 6.5%. And some of that is, and Emery Grover is not in, will be, this is the first year that Emery Grover will come back on
For a full 12
for a
months.
full 12 months.
Correct.
Um,
And these estimates were done before the fires in California.
what do you say?
The reinsurance market is gonna be very, very difficult for everybody, even
Yeah.
ourselves, individual policies. We're probably gonna be looking at an uptick.
From this budget,
No, oh, no, I'm just speaking
Just
of
for the-
the insurance market in
overall.
general.
yeah.
Yes.
Um. Anything else on questions, casualty, liability? Let's move to debt service, which,
And the declining, but.
it's like declining for a nanosecond, right?
But it's been 2 years in a row.
It has been 2 years in a row. You know what struck me though, is that. And I guess this. It just is what happens with significant capital expenditures, but we won't have fully repaid the first Pollard that. By the time we incur. Debt for the renovation of Pollard, right? Like, how will that work?
Well, we have to pay off. what we-
No, obviously, but it would roll into,
No, it's a standalone, loan stuff. However. Looking at the timetable of Pollard right now, we might be reaching the last payment. For the Pollard, the work done in the public school, a few years ago. By the time that we actually start paying it, because remember, you're not paying debt the year that the appropriation is actually made. It's always a minimum of 1 year beyond that.
mhm,
And then, this project will, take easily 2 to 3 years to complete. So, so it's probably 2 years removed before you have any significant, payment associated with Pollard School.
mhm.
So by that time, the remaining, debt service associated with it would be really the Pollard High Rock School. Debt issues that are still being amortized.
Mhm. So,
Dave, is
yeah,
is there any issue with us having outstanding debt obligations for a asset that doesn't, if Pollard's gonna get replaced, right? The asset doesn't exist. I don't know if that is an issue with the way our debt is structured or not. Like, do we need to have the corresponding asset to go with the debt?
It is not a legal problem or a financing problem because, unlike when we think of a mortgage on our home where the home is the collateral. The collateral for debt is the tax levy. And as a general obligation, it's actually the tax levy that's the guarantee that the debt will be repaid, not the asset.
Got it. Thank you.
so, yeah. Total debt service for fiscal year 2026 is 2.8% less than this year, uh. That's a beautiful thing. Any other questions about debt service? Okay,
I have a feeling we're gonna look at this number alone and it's gonna get so.
well, that's why we should preserve this one. Needham Electric Light and Gas Program.
So the,
Go ahead.
okay, so the initial budget request for the Needham Electric Light and Gas Program was a 5.7% increase, which, what this budget, pays for is the electricity used in all, public buildings and streetways, traffic lights, natural gas that's, used in all the, public buildings. It pays for the cost associated with solar electricity that's generated. And including the charging stations. It pays for repairs to street lights and signal knockdowns. And then there's a minor component for professional technical services, which assist us with analysis that have been provided to different state agencies for reporting solar generation. On the solar, particularly as everybody is probably aware, is we have a solar array at the landfill, at the old landfill, to which the power is generated by Tesla. Tesla is the company that owns it, and we pay Tesla about 9 cents per kilowatt for the power. We then sell the power to Eversource, and to which the town receives in the 20s, and last year was an exceptional year. We were paid on average 32 cents per kilowatt hour, the highest ever. And so it's a profit center for the town, and it generates in excess of $1 million in receipts, which is a general fund receipt, which helps fund services that are provided by the town. That with that, since the time of preparing this budget, we have gone out for new contracts for both electric supply and for natural gas. And although the electric supply price is higher than the contract that expired, and that expired in December at we were paying just under 10 cents per kilowatt. For the supply list, 9.31 cents per kilowatt. All the pricing that I was seeing and preparing for, knowing that we were going to be going out to bid when I was preparing this, I was looking at prices at and again, this is the supply portion. There are 3 parts to your electric bill. The only one that you can go out and buy on your own is the supply. The transmission and service, that's still regulated by the state and regulated portions. The assumption was going to be about 13 cents per kilowatt. We went out to bid, and the contract that we were able to lock into for 36 months, and the price is 11.98 cents per kilowatt. As a result of that, we were able to reduce our rate assumption from that build this budget, and all the information is in the budget submission. I show you the different buildings, the kilowatt assumption, which is based on a 3-year average multiplied by 26 cents per kilowatt, and was able to reduce that to 25 cents per kilowatt. And conversely, similar concept with natural gas, that the natural gas supply bid came in that'll 20 cents lower than what was anticipated for the supply. So we were able to reduce our rate assumption from $3.34 down to $3.14.
And that's for what period of time? 36 months? Or-
That one is a smaller, a lower period of time. That contract is through February of 27. The electric supply is good through January of 28. And I should mention back in the warrant for this town meeting, there is an article to amend the town's bylaws. For contracting purposes, seeking, currently we're capped on, entering contracts. For electric supply and natural gas supply to no more than 3 years or 36 months. But for gasoline, diesel fuel, we were in heating oil, we could do contracts up to 5 years. We're looking to amend the bylaw to allow us to go up to 5 years for these supplies, because the pricing is much better. Beyond that, in fact, there's, I mentioned to the select board, if we could have just been able to do a 38-month term on the natural gas supply, we would have been another 10% cheaper.
Mm.
So, and that was one of the decisions why we went only to 27, because there was not much more savings to go than for 36 months.
What was the justification and the differential between 36 months versus 5 years for?
The justification for one, since we already have supply contracts that can go that long, so that makes it a little easy to pass. And generally, the industries say that companies, they tend not to lock, the suppliers won't lock into a contract beyond 5 years. The sweet spot for many of them seems to be 48 months, but there are others that will bid 60 months. And hence, that's the reason why I thought, the ease of the town meeting, seeing that basically just expanding the number of energy types of energies that will be procured, can be procured for up to 5 years. And second is based upon what the industry itself says. And we do have a consultant that we use when we do go out to bid. Consultant was selected also through a competitive bid process, which we had multiple companies.
So is that reflected in the budget?
And that's reflected in what the town manager is recommending.
Okay.
So that $252,496 reduction from the initial request represents a 1 cent reduction in electricity and a 20-cent reduction in natural gas.
Okay. 20%, 20 cents in natural gas?
Yeah, 20 cents.
Okay. And how has this is my own interest, how has because Emery Grover is 100% electric, right?
Yes.
And how has that worked out? And
It's way too early
to tell.
to tell. That's it's way too early to tell. And the estimates based upon is based upon what the architects had assumed would be the annual load on the building, which is 200,000 kilowatts per year.
Is that built to the new code, the opt-in?
Yes, right? Emery Grover is.
And it
opt-in.
was built under the stretch code.
No, it was one, the specialized opt-in energy, not the stretch. I mean, it was one after the stretch, right?
I think we
don't
both.
No, I don't think, because I think that just took
Yeah.
effect this year in the permit was.
July.
Okay,
But it was still subject to the stretch code requirements.
but anything going forward will be the.
Yes, so the next standard that's now required.
Okay, great. Any other questions? No? All right, thank you very much. So the other thing that I wanted to do was and I distributed both electronically and in hard copy, just a breakdown of departmental budgets for us to look at discuss because we need to vote these next week. And what I included in here, is I put in irrespective of there are no DSR fours. I put in what the original DSR four requests were, so we could all, see what they were. And then the town manager's recommendation. And so what I really wanted to do was, plan to go kind of department by department. And so right now, if there are comments, concerns, let me know. And then next week, we're going to go department by department and vote the budget. So, fully. John will be here. Joe, will you be here next week? In person, Karen?
I'll be here next week in person
Okay,
or there. I'm not there now.
I'll be remote
okay.
next.
Um,
And I'll do that.
all right. Like I'll be here by myself. And I guess, Kate, I'm gonna just turn this over to you since you had to, question I had is, since they're just across the board. You didn't recommend any DSR fours. If for some reason our budget outlook changed at all, what would be your prioritization, or is that unfair?
The school department has a net reduction of over 11 positions, and so I think we have to be very mindful about adding on the town side when we're asking them to cut. There's a lot of needs there. And they worked really well with us to reduce it by over $2 million, which is a big deal.
The
So,
superintendent was with us 2 meetings ago. He said they were capping it at 20. But my understanding is he got something like 27 or 20.
on the retirements, yeah,
Retirements.
so they're gonna fill those, some of them, so their net reduction is 11.5-ish. So they're hoping to have savings between the people going out the door, some of whom they won't replace.
But he said he might come to us for a reserve fund transfer to pay for some of it.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
that-
it makes a lot of sense.
Is that still in play?
I haven't spoken to him since about that same time, but I would imagine you would hear from him.
I think it was to fund the incremental ones, so
Mhm.
they had the budget for 20, but there was something like what you said, 25 or
Yeah.
27.
That's
Well,
right,
and there's
that's
also
it.
the buyout incentive,
Yeah,
so there's a cost associated
Right,
with
so
doing
I
that.
think the funds would be for the buyout,
I think that's right.
right?
So to answer your question, I mean, there's a lot of positions that, the analyst in finance, the building official, the planner, there's a couple of public works positions, I mean, so, but, our budgets came in a way that we cut future, for the most part, future hires or, but the schools are actually reducing, so it's really hard for me to. Now, you always have made changes to the budget and we always feature rebound, so if you found a way.
No, I was just wondering, I know obviously this was a really difficult
Yeah, it's a tough
year.
year, yeah.
Interesting that it's a tough year, so it's just like anyone's household now. It's a tough year, except that our tax revenue is increasing, just not
Yeah.
robustly, we're not looking at a dire situation like when you were on the finance committee.
And expenses are just,
The expenses are through the roof.
they're through the roof.
Yeah.
I don't know about your gas bill, but my gas bill was over $500.
Yeah.
I'm like a homeowner now, wait a minute.
It could be worse. Did you read the press today about the town of Brookline School Committee?
I did not.
They've overspent their budget by $8 million and there's all sorts of stuff flying.
How's that possible?
That's what I asked when I read the article.
Can I ask a question about holistically how you looked at the operating budget versus the warrant articles and like made the decision not to fund any of the DSR fours in the budget, but I haven't looked at the warrant articles or what has not been recommended. How do you find the balance between this and those requests?
So, with almost very limited exception, the warrant articles are funded with one-time revenue. So if we fund the class and compensation plan this year, it's not like we have an ongoing obligation next year. So, that's how we don't want to create a structural imbalance in FY 27, by funding things. There are a couple, that we fund annually, that we do fund from the tax levy, property,
Building
Some of the
building maintenance,
Mhm.
yeah.
Some of the fun
Yeah.
and whatnot too, right?
Reserve funds are,
Utilization funds.
The athletic facility stabilization fund, because it's representing of the revenue that it brings in. The others tend to be from free cash. For instance, we have a placeholder, 380,000 to go into the capital facility fund. That's based upon the to change the formula that whatever the free cash amount is, the 2% would be put into that.
Mhm.
So it's the formulaic, essentially, how much money we have in the free cash, et cetera.
Correct.
And when does the state certify?
The state certifies once we have submitted all the financial data from FY 2024. And that all hasn't been completed yet. In fact, our audit's not completed yet
But
either.
I know just before we did some voting at town meeting, we did some amount of money changes to the warrant article.
That was exceptionally late last year. It was literally.
Like about a
it's
day.
Yeah,
right?
literally. Yes.
that's not gonna happen.
Yes, that was like Friday leading into the Monday town meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
That's will not be the position that we're in this year.
Everything you read, no, I wouldn't expect it either. So.
And do you anticipate any further surprises on the state side?
In terms of state aid, I think that the number our estimate that we started with was pretty much on target with what the governor came out. As those of you who have been on the committee for a long time, you know, my mantra is that budget years that are leading into an election, the legislature tends to be more generous and budget years not leading into an election. And this is a budget year not leading into an election year. They're not as generous. So I would not anticipate there'll be any significant changes to what the governor has recommended in her budget. And the fact is that if there were an increase in state aid, it would most likely be in chapter 70, which is for schools.
Mhm.
And we would be inclined that be used for that purpose.
What about the federal funding? Are there areas of concern that we're worried about and
Across the
watching?
board, across the board,
Where's the biggest exposure?
Education is one area, and health and human services is another area. It is, and it's always been a concern of ours, in terms of grants. They're great to have. They fund a lot of services and stuff, but it's not within the local control. It is, but on the forms, that's one of the questions we ask every year is, please disclose if any services are provided by state grants and federal and state grants. Because it's important for the folks the citizens also know how much of the services are also being paid by federal and state dollars. And also good for the finance committee to know, because some programs become successful and then we want to move them into the operating budget, and you gotta figure out, well, how we're gonna make that happen, and it shouldn't be a surprise.
Well, that's why, like, it looks like Health and Human Services budget is going up so dramatically this year, because it's the 3 grant funded positions that are in the full budget this year than half of it was last year, so.
Exactly, but those are areas of concern, but. But currently with the way Washington is, I would have thought that public safety was untouchable, and I'm not even certain public safety is immune to freezes and cuts in grants and programs, and public safety does rely on grants just as much as health and human services and public education. And it's, although most all the executive orders have been stayed by the courts to see if they're constitutional or not, but it's clear that they will eventually be reductions coming in some of those programs. There is some administrative rights that the executive branch has, such as which doesn't affect us as greatly as it affects private entities that receive federal funds. And that's the whole thing about what percentage of the grant pays for overhead. And so that's within the authority of the executive branch to make those sort of tweaks. There's a long way of saying is I think the FY26 is not going to be as difficult. But there's exposure, but I certainly believe 27 is going to be much more difficult because I think the president will probably get the legislature to actually give the executive branch more authority to make some of those reductions right now, because of the laws implemented that Congress passed. That is the reason most of the reductions have been stayed, is because the president, the executive branch doesn't have the authority to not disperse those funds because they're by congressional action.
There's also a lot of talk even today about cutting Medicaid, and if the federal government cuts Medicaid, the Commonwealth, I mean, it's like a huge portion of the Commonwealth budget. It is health insurance, and Medicaid, so.
As we envision Needham Center. And have, you did this to me. You didn't ask for it. No. We've got the grant from the federal government that requires the match and all that, but beyond that, how's it paid for? What other funds are there? Or is it eventually gonna come to the levy? You know?
We don't have a financing plan yet.
We're waiting for the vision.
You know, we have funding for the pilot, and then, you know, they'll do the cost estimate and the community will decide if they want to move forward.
So, okay. Some people think it has.
Were there,
Understandably, yes.
so going back to the budget and the things that we didn't fund, were there any needs, like, for instance, we heard today about, you know, all of the permits that we are so behind on. Were there any thoughts or ways that we could fund something like that with a contract, you know, to, like, that would be a one-time expense to get us caught up or to fulfill a need that some of the DSR4s were trying to fulfill ongoing, but like to me, that seemed like a liability for the town. That's a concern, that we're not, you know, we're not looking at permits every year. But were there other things that you identified that you were like, well, is there a creative way that we could fund this?
Not yet. I mean, we can talk to the building department about whether that would make any sense, but I can't think.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't know, just non-specifically about any other.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember there were a lot of different public works things. I'm not thinking of anything specifically, but I didn't know if that came up as a balance.
You know, by way of example, there's some things in the library that they can use alternative funding for, and we know they will, because they have state aid funding and they have some donation funding. we were able to invest in equipment replacement with ARPA funds, so we were able to cut the town IT budget for 1 year, so we did a lot of those trade-offs, I think, and just trying to 100,000 here, 100,000 there, trying to meet this budget gap.
Yeah.
I share Dave's concern that
So
FY
you-
27 could be worse, so.
In what, yeah,
And Carol, I'm reminded that your year was the pandemic year, you and Dick, right? Like, we didn't know if we were gonna like make payroll.
yes, so that was really. a tough
We
year.
canceled everything. that year,
Yes.
Yeah.
That was.
We
tough
made
for
it.
So many reasons and we did make it, but I feel the same way that you do, Dave, I worry about 27. So. Just have to. Keep that in mind and. Do the best we
So
can.
it seems the realization of hitting the general community.
Is it?
That it's not gonna be smooth sailing. I would think.
You think it is?
I'm just taking that reaction from the school superintendent and he clearly, I don't think has had to face that here.
I think people were surprised by his message this year. But yeah, I do. I mean, at least in my community of school or parents.
The last time we were in this position was really after 2008. So those budgets, 9, 10, 11, 12 were really tough. We had federal money and we kind of bridged it and didn't fund any DSR fours and it's like 10 years ago, yeah.
Is that when what was, Dan saying that, I forget what year they eliminated science. I think they just closed, they eliminated science labs in maybe Newman or the elementary schools because they didn't have the funds. So. So we'll get through this and we won't be doing this next year.
It's not here anymore.
Did
Right.
you, one other question, did you look at things that maybe could be taken out of the budget that are not as necessary? And how those butt up against maybe new needs or things? And did we make any trade-offs there in taking things? Well, obviously, I know we did at the school.
Yeah, yes, we did a lot of that. In a department like Public Works, they have overtime, they can move people around, so the custodian that we need for Hillside, I mean, they're gonna get that service done, so. It just means that they won't have overtime for some other things that they're working, so. We looked at. Whether we could just go in and take some expense money from everybody and just. I think we came up with like $40,000 and it would have been like everybody like having these plans and not being able to. Just complete their work, so, we thought the best way was not to add any new services or new positions. It's the way to go, but departments will be looking at what they have and how they can redeploy people and redeploy overtime if they have it.
Mhm.
The other thing, of course, is the departments were mindful that it was gonna be more difficult, so even. Their budget submissions were even trying to work within the realization that revenues were not gonna be as good as it has been. So that's why there were a lot of departments whose total submission was below what's the normal cost of providing services based on inflation and everything.
Mhm.
So that was also reflective, hence why there was not much you could reduce that, that would not directly impact the community itself. There is just, because there's so many, we would be at a point that you have to decide you're not gonna do something.
Yeah.
And then that's not something you decide in 60 days, that's usually a community conversation. And, And over the next year, if things continue to be as pessimistic as it appears, we'll be looking at those budgets in greater detail as well.
It's really the things people want that we end up having to, right? So one of the bad years, we stopped lining the fields, and you know, that was. It's just like,
Did
but
that
that's,
save much money?
well, you know, we eliminated 2 crafts workers whose jobs were like, you know, right, so. You know, but it never seems to, the core features that we have to bring in, like the people who bring in the tax revenue, right, they're not. They're not as easily seen by the public as like the lines, but the lines came back the next year.
Well, and the challenge is that. I mean, our population, the town's population is still modestly growing, right?
Yes,
So
it is, yeah.
it's hard to
Take things away.
take things away as your population is growing. So,
And managing the expectations. It's, people move into this town, pay what they pay for their houses, they're expecting a lot. And,
That is true.
and so it's going to be a cold shower, so.
one question that doesn't have any relation to budgets, but do we use on the roads and on the sidewalks pet safe salt?
We don't salt the sidewalks, so we use on the roads. Well, maybe on our own, aprons we do, but what is the,
Brian?
thank you, we brine those lines.
Okay,
That's
So
brine.
we don't use salt at
We
all?
do use salt, but not on sidewalks, is my understanding, is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. that's my
We're
understanding.
trying to reduce the use of salt by using the brine mixture,
It
but
works better.
yeah, it works better, but in some instances you can't get away from it.
But strangely, this is the second question I've had about salt and pets in the last week.
You know why though? Because I just needed to get some, we have pet safe salt because our driveway. Ever since some houses were built up the street and it's like, and the berm was changed. It's now a repository
Yeah.
of backflow, so it could be a hockey rink. So I needed to get some pet safe salt and last weekend, I went to 9 different places. And finally, this woman at PetSmart, you know, in Westwood said, oh, Dedham just changed the rules and that they have to use pet safe salt everywhere. And they literally bought us out of our inventory.
I don't know the answer, we can ask.
So I was just wondering, I had forgotten we used brine,
Yeah.
but. All right. Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Thank you.
If you think of anything, let us know.
That's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
I'll move, we adjourn.
Second. Again, roll call vote. Karen,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Joe. Harry.
Yes.
I'm not gonna make.
Peter, got it. Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
I'm the chair votes yes. Thank you.
I hope you feel better.
I really feel that badly, it's just more.